There's a moment that happens when people begin working with these systems.
A moment when the system suddenly seems very capable.
The answers look organized. The explanations sound confident.
And the system often produces ideas you hadn't thought of.
Unleash your creative AI engine. Episode 5, The Deference Trap, Why the Most Convincing Answers Can Still Mislead Us. Now here's the important thing. This reaction happens to everyone. Doctors, scientists, engineers, writers.
Because the human brain is designed to conserve energy.
When signals suggest something is reliable, we naturally stop double-checking every detail.
That mechanism usually works very well. It's why speed dial replaced memorizing phone numbers. Why GPS replaced maintaining a mental map of every road.
And why code generators can make developers forget certain syntax details.
So the brain quietly hands off some of the work.
Exactly. But language models introduce a subtle twist.
The language sounds confident.
The reasoning appears structured.
And before you realize it, the brain begins treating the answer like an authority.
So the answer feels trustworthy. What happens next?
Most people do something very natural. They accept the answer and move on.
And that's where the deference trap begins.
The system answers. The user accepts the output.
And without noticing it, directing stops.
But if the answer is wrong,
then the mistake travels forward into the work.
Because language models can hallucinate at any time.
Not because they are malfunctioning, but because they generate the most probable continuation of text.
Which means mistakes are always possible.
so people eventually discover the error.
And the reaction is usually emotional.
Some people blame the system. Others blame themselves for trusting it.
But both reactions miss the real issue.
The system was never meant to be an authority.
It was meant to be a collaborator. And collaborators still require judgment.
So if the system can be wrong, why use it at all?
That question appears everywhere right now. If you still have to check the answers, what's the point?
The answer is that most people are imagining the wrong role for the system.
They assume it should behave like a perfect encyclopedia. But that expectation creates two very different reactions.
Some people reject the system entirely. They decide it can't be trusted.
Which means they lose the leverage the system provides.
Other people fall into the opposite extreme. They assume the system must be right.
Which leads directly into the deference trap.
So both reactions miss the real opportunity.
The real power sits in the middle. The uncomfortable middle.
Where the system generates possibilities. And the human evaluates the direction.
The system becomes a technician, while the human becomes the director.
The designer. The producer of the final work. And that's where the leverage actually lives.
So why not just fix the problem with stronger safeguards? Why not design systems that simply can't be wrong?
Because that approach creates a different problem. The more tightly you constrain a generative system,
the more predictable it becomes. But also the less creative it becomes.
Because exploration is exactly what produces surprising ideas.
And surprising ideas always involve a little uncertainty.
So you can't completely remove the risk.
You can only decide how to manage it.
And that brings us back to the productive middle we discussed earlier.
The system generates possibilities. The human evaluates the direction.
The system expands the idea further. And the human continues directing the process.
The system becomes the technician, while the human becomes the designer.
The person responsible for the final direction.
So the responsibility never really disappears.
It simply moves to a higher level.
From technician to director.
So the goal isn't to eliminate mistakes.
Correct. The goal is to maintain judgment.
Because judgment is the one capability the system cannot replace.
The system generates possibilities. The human chooses which direction matters.
The system expands the idea further.
And the human continues refining the trajectory.
So the system does the heavy lifting.
Exactly. The system becomes the technician, while the human becomes the director.
The designer of the trajectory.
The producer responsible for the final outcome.
Which is where the real leverage lives.
But directing a system raises an interesting question. Where do good ideas actually begin?
Because they rarely start as finished concepts.
More often they begin as fragments.
Fragments that only reveal their potential through exploration. Which brings us to the next episode. Episode 6, Fragments and Exploration.